How are you? I hope you are fine. Yes, I believe you got to know that our fate was determined by the man himself, the President of Uganda, in the recent State of the Nation address. But it shouldn't be the reason for somebody to give up this noble cause. The struggle must continue. So people who are sharing on this platform, you should continue encouraging your comrades not to give up. If teachers have not given up this cause, why should somebody give up? It makes me sick when I hear over the radio and the other media houses that there are students who have already given up. You should not give up. Uganda is not ending today, neither tomorrow. So the struggle must continue. In our previous lesson, we had analyzed the problems which had occurred in the Balkans, and we are done with them. And in our lesson of the unification of Germany, we saw one man Bismarck. We saw Prince Otto von Bismarck as the chief engineer of the Germany unification. By 1871, Bismarck had yielded the Germany unification. So after Bismarck unifying all the German states under one umbrella, then he had to design foreign policies which were intended to make a new born empire to appear strong in European politics. But if we could go further, let us make a flashback and we trace the history of Prince Otto von Bismarck. So Otto von Bismarck was born in 1815 in Eastern Prussia, and he grew up from a Janka family. He was a landed man who owned a lot of property. He grew from an aristocratic family with a lot of privileges and wealth. Then he went to university and he graduated. Then he served in government offices as a public servant. Then he retired and went at his estate and did some business there. Then in 1847, Bismarck joined the Prussian Parliament. Bismarck joined the Prussian Parliament, and by that time Prussia was under King William III. Then in 1851, Bismarck represented Prussia in the Confederation Diet. Remember the Confederation Diet? This was the parliament which was uniting all the German states. While in that parliament, Bismarck was very, very vocal against Austria's dominance in the Confederation Diet. And the king was scared of Bismarck's outspokenness and his sarcastic remarks made during the parliamentary meetings and talks. And the king said that Bismarck was only to be employed when the time of the bayonet had reigned. Then Bismarck was sent to represent Prussia in France, that is in Paris or France, as an ambassador, and did that job from 1851 to 62. Then in 62, he was transferred to Moscow of Russia. Then in 1862, he was called back to Prussia, and he was appointed as minister president. And we saw how Bismarck unified Germany through his blood and the iron policy. After Bismarck putting all the German states under one umbrella, then he had to design foreign policies, because any leader must design both foreign and domestic policies. So after Bismarck unifying the German states in 1871 in the whole of Miraz, that is Versailles, in Versailles of France, Bismarck, remember, Germany was proclaimed as an empire under Emperor William one as the Kaiser. So the Emperor of Germany came to be known as Kaiser. So it was the title given to the Emperor of the Germany Empire. So King William I became Kaiser William I, and Bismarck became the Chancellor of Germany, where Bismarck as the Chancellor had to do the donkey work of the Germany Empire. So this topic is now, which we're going to look at, is the so-called Bismarckan Era, 1871 and 1890. So we're going to analyze, we're going to assess how Bismarck achieved in his foreign policies, and Bismarck succeeded more in his foreign policies. So Bismarck's foreign policies were intended to isolate France from organizing a revenging war against Germany. He also intended to isolate France from other European nations. Then Bismarck intended to promote European peace, then to dominate European politics, and also to promote diplomacy in Europe. So all Bismarck's foreign policies were rotating around those aims and objectives. He was after isolating France from other European monarchies. Then he was also after stopping any war of vengeance from France. He was also interested in promoting European peace, which could enable the proper growth of the newborn empire. And also Bismarck wanted to dominate European affairs. So in 1871, the German Empire was born in the whole of mirrors, that is Paris. Bismarck as the Chancellor, Emperor, King William I as the Kaiser. So Bismarck designed a number of foreign policies. We shall begin with the Frankfurt Treaty of 1871. Bismarck's first move was to force France to sign the Frankfurt Treaty of 1871. This was the treaty which concluded the Franco-Prussian War, where Prussia defeated France at the Battle of Sedan. Then Bismarck went ahead to force France to sign this treaty in the whole of mirrors at Versailles. In this treaty, Bismarck forced France to accept defeat. Then Bismarck confiscated the two French territories, Alsace and Lorraine. These were confiscated from France, and they were rich in coal and other minerals. And also Bismarck confiscated these states so as to protect the German Empire from any attack from France in southeast. That's why Bismarck confiscated the Alsace and the Lorraine. Bismarck also went ahead and he put a heavy indemnity of 200 million pounds to France. France was to pay this huge sum of money so as to compensate what Germany had lost in the war and to cover the costs of the war. Also, Bismarck had to put an army of occupation in France to monitor France's military activities. And finally, Bismarck put a condition that he was not to sign that treaty unless France had formed a republic. He also went ahead to force France to form a republic, and that was fulfilled in 1871. So, in the Frankfurt Treaty, Bismarck scored because he humbled France. All those conditions, all those terms which were contained in the Frankfurt Treaty enabled him to humble France. And there was no way France would associate with other European powers, because Bismarck had forced France to form a republic, and the other monarchical leaders of Europe could not associate with the republican leader of France. Then Bismarck had to put a heavy indemnity on France, which weakened France economically, and France would not plan any war of vengeance against Germany. He also stationed an army of occupation in France, which monitored France's military activities. In so doing, Bismarck scored in his foreign policies because he controlled France's activities against Germany, as per the Frankfurt Treaty. Then another foreign move of Bismarck was the formation of the first three emperors' league. The formation of the first three emperors' league. In 1872, Prince Otto von Bismarck called upon other emperors of Europe, who included the Emperor of Austria and the Tsar of Russia, to form the Three Emperors League. The first Three Emperors League was formed in 1872 after those powers signing the Treaty of Dreikaisersband. In that treaty, those countries were to consult on one another on issues concerning security, economy, and others. They also intended to scare France, not to revenge against Germany, because those states were ready to fight France if she had aggressed against Germany. Another motive behind the formation of the Free Emperors League, of the first Free Emperors League in 1872, was to fight the socialist revolutions in Europe. Remember, the socialists were agitating and demanding for good working conditions of the workers in the industrial sectors of Europe. So Bismarck and the other emperors, including the Emperor of Austria, including the Emperor of Russia, were after controlling the socialist revolutions. So through the Free Emperors League, Bismarck managed to isolate France from revenging against Germany, managed to secure friendship for the German Empire from Austria and Russia, managed to control socialist revolutions in Europe. So that was the first Three Emperors League, which was formed after the Treaty of Dreikaisersband. And there Bismarck had initiated the alliance system. And his first alliance was the first Free Emperors League of 1872, which was signed after the Treaty of Dreikaisersband. And we have seen the aims of the Dreikaisersband Treaty. They were to consult one another on issues concerning security. They were to scare France from revenging against Germany. They were to fight socialist revolutions. Then we shall look at the War of Nerves. War of Nerves of 1875. Another move of Bismarck in his foreign policy was the War of Nerves of 1875. Remember, in the Frankfurt Treaty of 1871, Bismarck had imposed a heavy indemnity on France, and he had put an army of occupation in France to monitor its activities. But after France clearing the war indemnity, Bismarck had to withdraw the army of occupation from France, and then France started reorganizing militarily and economically. So the military reorganization of France scared Bismarck. Bismarck was scared by the military rearrangement of France. And here, Bismarck, as a man of press, as a man of newspaper, he went ahead and encouraged German newspapers to write hostile articles threatening war against France. In so doing, Bismarck scored because he contained France's advancement in rearmament. Because through the German newspapers, Bismarck showed that he was very ready to fight France in case its military arrangement was threatening Germany's peace. There Bismarck scored, though it negatively affected him because the Tsar of Russia and the Queen Victoria of Britain threatened Bismarck that please, in case you fight against France, We shall come in and give France total support. Then Bismarck had to give up his war, his verbal threats or war of nerves, because the Tsar of Russia went to Berlin and visited him and warned him of his war arrangement. Even Queen Victoria, the second of England, threatened him to give up his military arrangement. So in the military, in his war of nerves, Bismarck scored because he threatened France not to wage a war of vengeance against Bismarck. And then withdrawing his verbal threats, it worked for him because it kept a friendly relationship between him and the other powers, including Russia and Britain. Then, in the same year, 1875, Bismarck succeeded in forcing France to form a Republican government. A Republican government under Adolf Hitler and Macron was formed in France. And that government was isolated from other monarchical rulers of Europe. Another arrangement of Bismarck and his foreign policy included the Berlin Congress of 1878. So, in 1878, Prince Otto von Bismarck chaired the Berlin Congress of 1878. That meeting was summoned in order to settle the problems which had occurred in the Balkan region. Remember, in the Paris Treaty of 1860, Russia's activities in the Balkans were checked. But in 1875-78, the Balkan states of Bulgaria, Montenegro, and others rose up against Turkey for our continued mistreatment of the Christian subjects. And then they were joined by Russia. And finally, Turkey was defeated and was forced to sign the Treaty of San Stefano. That Treaty of San Stefano, Bosnia and Herzegovina were given independence against Austria's interests. Then Russia created a state within the Ottoman Empire names of the big Bulgaria, which was to be controlled by Russia. Those two terms of the Treaty of San Stefano annoyed Britain and Austria to threaten war against Russia. In Britain, people were demanding for war. Even there was a popular song which the British sang in their theaters, that we don't want to fight, but by the jingle we shall fight. We have got the men, we have got the soldiers and the warships. So they were ready for war. But Bismarck, as a king of diplomacy, as a leader who wanted Europe to be at peace, had to call the Berlin Congress of 1878 as the honesty broker. Because people were fighting from the Balkans, included two of his allies, Russia and Austria-Hungary. So Bismarck called the Berlin Congress of 1878 in order to cancel out the Treaty of San Stefano, which was carrying terms which were threatening Britain and Austria's interest. In that treaty, Bismarck gave Bosnia and Herzegovina to Austria. Then Britain got Cyprus, and the big Bulgaria was dismantled. In so doing, Bismarck settled the problems in the Balkans, which were threatening European peace. But in the same treaty, Bismarck messed up when he put Bosnia and Herzegovina under Austria's control. Those were Slav people who never wanted to be under Austria's control. That's why later on they formed the Black and Rebel group, which was to fight for their independence. No wonder one woman said after the Berlin Congress of 1878 that what a grave mistake Bismarck has done. Bismarck putting Bosnia and Herzegovina under Austria's control. He went against the Slav nationalism. It explains why they were started from the Balkans. Then, Then another in 1879, Bismarck formed the duo alliance. The duo alliance included Austria and Germany. During the Berlin Congress of 1878, Bismarck supported Austria's interest instead of Austria's interests. He supported Austria because Germany and Austria, they were friends. They were German-speaking people. And on top of that, Austria had been neutral in the Franco-Prussian War. And Russia had threatened him after his naval threats, after his war attacks against France in 1875. And his alliance with Austria would enable him to control River Danube. So that's why Bismarck had to support Austria. And had he chosen Russia, it would create conflicts between him and Britain, because Britain and Russia were natural enemies. That's why Bismarck supported Austria. It explains why Russia pulled out of the First Free Emperors League in 1878. And this made Bismarck to sign the so-called duo alliance. In the duo alliance, Austria and Germany promised each other support in case of war from Russia. In so doing, Bismarck succeeded to strengthen his friendship with Austria. Then Bismarck supported France's occupation of Tunisia. Remember, in 1846, France had occupied North Africa, that is Algeria, during the regime of Charles X and Louis Philippe. And by that time, France had very many settlers in Algeria. But later on, Italy also wanted to get some territories in North Africa, and that was Tunisia. But Bismarck, in order to divert France from Alsace and Lorraine, he encouraged France to occupy Tunisia against Italy's interests. So there Bismarck succeeded because he diverted France from Europe to Africa by supporting our colonial interests in Tunisia against Italy. In so doing, Bismarck scored, because later on Italy was annoyed, and in 1882 Bismarck managed to attract Italy on the side of Germany in the Triple Alliance of 72. Then, remember, that is France's occupation of Tunisia, which was supported by Bismarck. Another tool Bismarck has in policy was the revival of the first three emperors, reign of 1881. In 1881, Bismarck managed to persuade Russia to join Austria and Germany to revive the first three emperors' reign, and it was revived in 1881. Then in 1882, Bismarck formed the Triple Alliance. Bismarck formed the Triple Alliance in 1882, and this alliance included Austria, Germany, and Italy. Remember, Italy was annoyed by France's activities in North Africa against its interests. That's why Italy had to join Triple Alliance of 1882, where those three countries were to help each other in a case of war from from France or any other country in Europe. So what you have to know, Bismarck succeeded in his foreign policies through a series or a network of alliance. And his foreign policy was full of alliances. Then another tool of Bismarck's foreign policy included treaties in 1883 to 88. Bismarck signed defensive treaties with Romania. In 1883 to 1888, Bismarck signed the defensive treaties with Romania. There, the members of Triple Alliance, who included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, had a separate arrangement, had a defensive arrangement with Romania. In so doing, they extended their friendship in the East. In so doing, Bismarck squad in creating Romania, in having Romania as his friend. Then, another foreign tour of Bismarck was the Berlin Conference. Was the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85. This one differs from the Berlin Congress of 1878. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85 was chaired by Bismarck to handle the scramble and the partition of Africa. Remember, after the Industrial Revolution, European nations had started coming in Africa to get new areas of market and the mineral resources. And the European nations had accumulated some conflicts within Africa during their scramble and the partition. And at first, Bismarck was not interested in getting colonies in Africa. And one time he bragged that there isn't any colony in Africa which was worth a bone of a German soldier. Bismarck once remarked that there isn't any colony in Africa which is worth a bone of a German soldier. He was very reluctant and adamant about colonialism. But in 1884-85, the German traders and missionaries had to pressurize Bismarck to get colonies in Africa because Karl Peters was in Tanzania. They were everywhere. So what Bismarck did was to call the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85 to confirm where European nations were to get territories in a peaceful way, because in the process of getting colonies, it had created tension and conflicts among European nations. But the Berlin Conference of 1884-85 confirmed peaceful scramble and partition. And in that meeting, European nations came up with the so-called the demand of effective occupation, where in case each state had taken over a territory, no other power would be allowed to control to get that territory. That's why they came up with the issue of the effective occupation, that in case one European nation had taken over an African territory, an African country as a territory, it would put their developments in the form of rail transport, schools, administrative centers, and very many others. So at Berlin, Bismarck managed to handle the issue of partition and scramble in a peaceful way, hence saving Europe from fighting. That was the Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884-85. It was to handle the partition and the scramble of Africa. Bismarck didn't want to see European nations fighting for colonies in Africa. And remember, himself had engaged the German Empire. Then Bismarck also solved the Bismarckan problem of 1885 to 80. to take over Eastern Rumelia against the Berlin Congress of 1878. After Bulgaria taking over Eastern Rumelia, it was merged. Eastern Rumelia was merged in Bulgaria, and then Bulgaria declared itself independent, and then it had to chase away the Austrian, the Russian ambassador from Bulgaria, and it declared itself independent. Then it had to choose the German prince, the Prince of Saxe-Coburg, as the Prince of Bulgaria, something which was rejected by Russia. But Bismarck went ahead to support Bulgaria against Russia. So Bismarck supported the independence of Bulgaria from Russia, where Bulgaria had expelled the Russian ambassador from Bulgaria, and it had merged Eastern Rumelia into Bulgaria, and it had declared itself independent, and then it had to nominate the prince from Germany, that was the Prince of Saxe-Coburg, as the Prince of Bulgaria, and which Russia was not interested in, but Bismarck supported Bulgaria's independence. Then another tool of Bismarck's foreign policy was the 1887 reassurance treaty. In this treaty, Bismarck confirmed or renewed his friendship with Russia. In the reassurance treaty, Bismarck confirmed and strengthened his friendship with Russia, and that friendship was to be renewed after every 3 years, but was not renewed after the resignation of Bismarck. Then another tool was the Heligoland Treaty of 1890. Bismarck also initiated the Heligoland Treaty of 1890. Heligoland had been an island in the North Sea, which Bismarck acquired after the Vienna settlement of 1814-15. So, Britain compensated Germany with that island of Heligoland after Germany giving up its claims over Uganda and the Sultanate of Zanzibar. Germany was interested in Uganda and Zanzibar against Britain's interests. But what Bismarck did, he gave up Uganda and the Sultanate of Zanzibar to Britain, and Britain compensated by the Heligoland Island, which was located in the North Sea. And that kind of agreement came to be known as the Heligoland Treaty. Then, another tool of Bismarck's foreign policy was the naval reluctance policy. Naval reluctance policy. Remember, for along, right from the Napoleonic days, Britain had emerged as the king of navy, as the king of water. Britain had controlled European waters for so long. Remember, even Napoleon himself revealed that had he controlled European seas for 6 hours, Britain would cease to exist. That's why Britain defeated Napoleon in all naval wars. Bismarck, knowing that Britain had been the naval power of Europe, Bismarck avoided establishing a stronger navy which would outcompete that of Britain. And Bismarck considered himself as the land rat, as the king of infantry, while he regarded Britain as the king of water. And himself said, there is no need for a land rat to fight a water rat. That's why Bismarck kept the German navy at an inferior position, not because he wanted it to be at that level. No, it was after creating chaos from Britain. That's why he kept Germany's navy at an inferior position. In 1888, Emperor Kaiser William I, a man who had worked with Bismarck for almost 28 years, passed away. And then his son succeeded him as the new emperor, and he came to be known as Emperor Kaiser William II. Kaiser William was a young, ambitious man who conflicted with Bismarck over the domestic policy of the German Empire. That's why in 1890, Bismarck concluded his career as a leader, as a Chancellor of Germany, as a European diplomat. And Bismarck was regarded as a man of peace, as a man of diplomacy, So all those foreign policies and network of alliances we have looked at, it is the so-called Bismarckan Era, 1871 to 1890. Bismarck was the king of diplomacy, he was the man of peace. So, according to Dennis Richard, he said, Bismarck was like a clever juggler. Bismarck was like a clever juggler who was playing around with the 5 costly plates. Bismarck was like a clever juggler who was holding 5 plates, spinning those plates in the air. And those plates were in danger of falling and injuring the juggler. But for Bismarck's knowledge and genius, nothing happened. So, in his foreign policy, Bismarck played around. He handled these European nations. He handled Britain, Russia, Austria-Hungary, Britain, and Italy. So, Bismarck was a master of statecraft. He had art of international diplomacy. He handled all these nations with a lot of care. They would have endangered him, but Bismarck was good at playing his political cards when it came to foreign policies. That's why generation era from 1871 to 1890 was regarded as the Bismarckian era, and Bismarck was regarded as a man of peace. It explains why Dennis Richard regarded him as a clever juggler. A juggler is somebody who plays, who entertains people using plates. So that's why Dennis Richard said Bismarck was like a clever juggler who could play around with 5 plates spinning through the air. And those 5 plates, those 5 costly plates were in danger because Bismarck was playing around with 5 plates, very costly plates. And those 5 plates were in danger of falling and injuring him. But because of his genius and his art in statecraft, nothing happened. And these are the 5 plates we are talking about. Bismarck handled the 5 major European powers. He was outmaneuvering them. He was playing around with them. He was manipulating those states for his interests, for the interests of the German Empire, and for himself. But Bismarck succeeded. So when it comes to Bismarck's foreign policies, they always ask questions like this one: to what extent was Bismarck a man of peace? This question should be to a larger extent. To a larger extent, Bismarck was a man of peace because he created the peace in Europe from 1871 to 1890 and nothing dangerous happened. Then another question which they could ask, to what extent did Bismarck dominate European politics? Both these two questions are calling for the same answers. It's only the phrasing which differs. Then another question they can ask, how did Bismarck maintain the German supremacy in Europe? How did Bismarck maintain the German supremacy in Europe? That is the one-sided question, calling rotating around the German. Then in 2017, UNEB set a question, describe the methods which Bismarck used to isolate France. Which Bismarck used to isolate France. UNEB can set such a question. Or to what extent, or assess the achievements of Bismarck in his foreign policies from 1871 to 1890. Assess the achievement of Bismarck in his foreign policies from 1871 to 1890. And the other very many questions which can be set under Bismarck's foreign policy. Bismarck's foreign policy, they move in a series. They are in a series. They are like a movie. They are like a movie. They are in episodes and they are in a series. So we started with the 1871 Francafati Treaty. And in each foreign policy, Bismarck scored, and at a small extent he lost. Like in the Francafati Treaty of 1871, Bismarck managed to control a war of revenge from France. Because it stationed the army of occupation in France, he had to put heavy indemnity of 200 million pounds to France to weaken her economically. He confiscated the French flag. He also confiscated Alsace and Lorraine for economic and defensive purpose. And then it forced France to sign to form a republic, which was achieved in 1875. In all those, Bismarck scored. But you can say in the Francfort Treaty, Bismarck put unfair terms on France during the Francfort Treaty, which allowed France to plan a war of revenge against France, against Germany. That was a negative. Then, in 1872, Bismarck formed the first free emperors Reich, which contained Russia and Germany and Austria, where they were to consult on one another, where they were to fight socialist revolutions, where they were to scare a war of revenge from France. And in this treaty, Bismarck succeeded. This alliance was formed after signing a treaty of Dreieckers-Band. Then, in 1875, Bismarck fought the war of nerves, where he encouraged German newspapers to write hostile articles against France, declaring war against France. And he achieved because he contained France's rearmament program, and he also, withdrawing his verbal threats, created a peace between him and other powers, especially Britain and Russia, which had won a war against him. Then in the same year, France formed a republic. Then 1878, Bismarck chaired the Berlin Congress, in which he cancelled out the Treaty of San Stefano, which had threatened the European peace. In so doing, Bismarck scored because he settled the matter which had made almost all European powers to conflict with one another, especially his allies, which included Russia and Austria. And then the Treaty of San Stefano was cancelled out in the Berlin Congress of 1878. And in that Congress, Bismarck acted as the honest broker. He didn't benefit from that arrangement, but he wanted to maintain European peace because his allies were conflicting. Then, Bismarck's bias at Berlin forced Russia to pull out of the first three emperors' league, and then Russia moved out, and Bismarck and Austria formed the duo alliance of 1879, in which they pledged to help each other in a case of war from Russia and France or any other power. Then in 1881, Bismarck supported France's occupation of Tunisia against Italy's intentions. In 1881, he revived or he formed the second Free Emperors League, which included Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary, where Russia was called back, and then they renewed their friendship. Then, in 1882, Bismarck formed the Triple Alliance, which stood up in 1914. The Triple Alliance included Austria-Hungary, Italy, and Germany, where they promised to help each other in a case of war from France. And that alliance lived up to 1914. Then, in 1883 to 88, Bismarck signed a defensive agreement with Romania. Then another arrangement was the Berlin 1884 to 85 Berlin Colonial Conference, where the fate of Africa was settled from Berlin of Germany. The other African states were shared by European powers. As a cake, they shared the African territories. As a cake in Berlin of Germany. Their colonialism was done in an effective way. Then, 1885, Bismarck solved the Balkan problems, where he supported the independence of Bulgaria from Russia. Then, 1887, he signed the reinsurance treaty with Russia, where they guaranteed their mutual understanding, and that treaty was to be renewed after every 3 years. Then, in 1890, Bismarck signed the Heligoland Treaty. Heligoland was an island in North Sea, which Britain controlled right away from the days of Napoleon, after the downfall of Napoleon I. It was given to Britain by the Vienna settlement of 1415. And Bismarck gave that Heligoland Island to Germany as a way of compensating Germany for having lost the Sultanate of Zanzibar and Uganda. And so doing, Bismarck was scoring 1890 Heligoland Treaty. Then the naval reluctance policy. Britain being an island, what you have to know, Britain was an island. Policy was a policy engineered by one man, Bismarck, where he kept the German Navy at an inferior position, not to confront Britain as the naval power of Europe, right from the days of Emperor Napoleon I. So Bismarck kept Germany's navy at a low level, and for him he considered himself as the land rat, while Britain the water rat. And he himself remarked there is no reason why a water rat would fight a land rat. In conclusion, to a larger extent, Bismarck succeeded in his foreign policies because he managed to create peace in Europe. He managed to isolate France from revenge against Germany. He managed to dominate European politics and made Berlin the capital of Germany, the center of diplomacy. Explaining why era or period between 1871 to 1890 was branded as the Bismarckan Era. However, to a smaller extent, Bismarck messed up in his foreign policy. There is somewhere where Bismarck meandered and sowed seeds for future instabilities, like in the Berlin Congress of 1878. Bismarck put Bosnia and Herzegovina under Austria's control, something which intensified problems in the Balkan region. It is Bismarck who created the mess which caused the World War I. That's why he told Israel, I shall not see the war. You will. It will begin from the Far East. It is not because Bismarck was a prophet like Jeremiah and others or Isaiah. No. He had created the mess in the Far East. But all in all, Bismarck scored in his foreign policy. He was the king of diplomacy. He was the master. He was a master in statecraft. And all nations have built their foreign policies basing on Bismarck's alliances and the diplomatic arrangement. It explains why as Dennis Richard was explaining Bismarck's foreign policies, he said Bismarck was like a clever juggler who could keep five costly plates. These are not plates, these are pieces of chalk. But Bismarck kept 5 costly plates spinning through the air, and those plates were in danger of falling and endangering the juggler. But for Bismarck's smartness, nothing happened. That was Bismarck. He was very good when it came to foreign policies. However, he had some loopholes. Like we can say, he sowed the seeds for future instabilities, like putting Bosnia and Herzegovina under Austria's control. It was a miscalculation for a wise man like Bismarck. That's why one woman said, what a great mistake Bismarck has committed. Then we could say, Bismarck put unfair terms on France. So, which was intolerable by the Frenchmen. Hence, explain the development of the revenge that need for vengeance by the Frenchmen. We could also say that Bismarck's alliances were unreliable. For example, the the first Free Emperor's League by 1879 was no more. Was no more. We could also say that Bismarck failed to completely isolate France because immediately after his term of office, France was moved away from isolation. So Bismarck had some, we could also say that Bismarck intensified colonialism in Africa when he encouraged Tunisia's occupation, France's occupation of Tunisia against Hitler. You can also say that Bismarck created conflicts amongst European powers for his selfish interests. That was one man, Bismarck, a king of diplomacy, a man of peace, who through his alliance system controlled European peace. Throughout his term, Bismarck left Europe a clean man. Bismarck left Europe a clean man. Trouble only happened after his term. But during his 20 years in office, Bismarck handled European diplomacy with a lot of care. He handled those 5 nations with a lot of care. That's why none of them fought him, but instead they were in his perimeter. He kept all those European nations in his perimeter. He was controlling them. They were under his camera surveillance. So that's how one man Bismarck, that's how Prince Otto von Bismarck controlled European peace. He managed to isolate France from other monarchical countries of Europe, explaining France only got an ally after Bismarck left power. He made Berlin the capital city of Germany to be the center of diplomacy. Remember, London and Vienna were the European centers of diplomacy. Then Bismarck managed to dominate European peace. During his era, he was the only man to play the political cards, while others were political spectators, as Bismarck was enjoying his political cards. So Bismarck, the Bismarckian era, they always set questions on foreign policies. They can set on how he isolated France, on how he scored. They describe the methods which were used by Bismarck to isolate France. There you play around with all those policies. Then to what extent was Bismarck a man of peace? There you show us how he scored and how he lost, but it must be to a larger. It is a must to a larger extent Bismarck was a man of peace, or to a large extent Bismarck succeeded in his foreign policies. Or they can set a question, to what extent did Bismarck dominate European politics? To a larger extent dominated. So that's how Bismarck controlled European. For today we are going to end here. I continue to call upon people to continue being dedicated and committed to this noble cause. Uganda is not ending today or tomorrow. The struggle continues for good in my country.